It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
A plane load of European Social Democrats is on its way to Washington, D.C. to try to persuade a right-wing Republican American president to continue the war. Oh, how the political tables have changed. And the European and American liberal broadcasters and media prove one thing beyond any other. They are desperate for war. War whores, every last one of them. I'm angry tonight, and you'll know all about it in just 30 seconds. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Let's get the war whores out of the way first. The prostitutes in the United States, where the liberal domination of the broadcast media, even though hardly anyone watches it, then fuels the newspapers, which fuel the liberal broadcasters. But the British broadcasters took the biscuit during the epic Alaska summit. The BBC and Sky News could not contain themselves. They could not contain their mixture of rage and grief at the possibility that a summit between the only two world leaders who matter in the Ukraine affair were getting ready to meet. You know, to talk, to negotiate, the kind of thing that used to happen in world conflicts all the time, even during the Cold War. It was a normal thing for people to shuttle their diplomacy. But there they were, their tears, acid tears, dripping into their microphones. And the British, as I say, were even worse. But let's start with the Americans. Nancy Pelosi. Let me start with her. Wish I could finish with her. I wish I could wring, metaphorically, her neck. She says that the sight of American servicemen giving respect to a man with blood on his hands in Alaska was simply beyond the pale. This is the woman who led repeated standing ovations for the blood-soaked, dripping in blood from head to toe, Benjamin Netanyahu, throughout the entirety of this murderous crisis in the Gaza Strip. This is a woman, the third woman in the United States of America, third most senior leader, who gave every conceivable support to President Biden's massacres of the Palestinian people. Hundreds of thousands of dead people. It's you that's got blood on your hands and too much alcohol in your bloodstream, Mrs. Pelosi. How's your husband, by the way? The CBS, MSNBC, even Fox News, they could not contain their rage that Donald Trump, the man about whom they are quite deranged, just might pull off an end to a war which has killed hundreds of thousands of people, beggared the European economies, and taken us to the precipice of a nuclear conflagration. They could not bear not only that it could not end, but that it might be Donald Trump who brought it to an end. Look, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. And Trump was right to try the talks in Alaska. And he'll be even more right to go to Moscow for a second and hopefully conclusive set of negotiations as soon as possible. And you have to be brave enough to say that. It's the right-wing Republican, the guy out of Midnight Cowboy, Buck, I think his name was. That guy, he's right. And the social democrats from Europe are the ones who are wrong. Let me focus for a minute on them. Most of them you've never heard of. Somebody called Stubb, a president, Stubb, is headed for Washington to try and browbeat and bully big Donald Trump out of his peacemaking efforts. Somebody called Rutt, who's the esteemed Secretary General, appointed, elected by no one, of something called NATO, 80% funded by the American taxpayer. Somebody called Starmer, the most unpopular political leader in the entire history of Great Britain. I'm not making that up. His opinion poll ratings are now at 13%, 13%. He's a total disaster. Britain is going down the tubes. It's going down the drain. But he's on the plane to Washington to try and put his tuppence worth, so we've got here in Britain, tuppence, his tuppence worth in. And his little inky finger clerk, John Healey, I know you don't know him, but he's the war leader in Britain. He's again stating that Britain is going to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. He's totally desperate to send our young men and women into harm's way. And believe me, any British troops on the ground, any British boots on the ground will very quickly be empty boots. And the young men and women from our country sent into this bloody maw, this rerun of the Crimean War in the fantasies of the British state, will be being shipped home without their shoes in wooden boxes. Somebody called Macron, whose wife beats him in public on camera. Somebody called Merz, his grandfather a Nazi officer from Germany, which has bankrupted itself and blown up its own infrastructure at the behest of the Biden administration. They are all flying with Zelensky for a meeting in the White House tomorrow. Yeah. He needs to come eight-handed, Zelensky. Well, after what happened to him last time, maybe that's a good idea. These barking dogs, these chihuahuas that are his accompaniment in these talks should be locked in the kennels by Donald Trump. Most of them are rabid anyway. Suspicion of rabies, impound them. But if Donald Trump allows Zelensky and these 7 dwarves into the Oval Office, they will swarm him in front of the cameras, because Donald cannot do anything other than appear on camera. University TV can get an interview with Donald Trump. He'll bring the cameras in. And the European Social Democrats, who pay a tiny proportion of NATO's costs, who don't have an army, navy, and air force between the whole lot of them, will try to persuade Donald Trump to fight to the last Ukrainian, and then, if necessary, to join the war himself. And then we'll find out if Donald Trump is a man or a mouse. If he succumbs to these barking chihuahuas, well, he's the latter. He's a mouse, and the war will go on. And if the war goes on, Russia may take the entire country of Ukraine. It will definitely, without any doubt, take the entire coastline, starting with the jewel of Odessa. If Russia has to, they'll go on advancing 110 square miles every 2 days until they're across the river and threatening Kiev. If this war goes on, somebody called Stub won't be any good to little Zelensky. Somebody called Rut will be exposed as just a little tailor's dummy. The European leaders, so-called, none of them with anything remotely approaching a majority of support in their own countries, are going there for one reason only: to continue the war. Now just contemplate that ontologically for a minute. In the past, American presidents laid waste the world in useless and bogus foreign wars. And the Europeans were the ones who tried to hold them back, who tried to restrain mad dogs in the White House. Now, it's the American president that wants peace, and the European Social Democrats that want war. And their oppositions don't have the guts or the gumption to stand up and call them out. Who's calling out the British government, for example, over the war? Nobody. Not one person in Parliament is robustly demanding an end to the war in Ukraine. And when I say not one person, I mean not one single person. We have a one-party state in Britain that looks and sounds like the Reichstag under Adolf Hitler. And while I'm on the subject of Hitler, Mr. Lavrov is coming in for a great deal of criticism for turning up with a T-shirt marked CCCP, USSR. One idiot just said on Twitter, imagine a German statesman turning up with a T-shirt marked Third Reich. Have you seen Mr. Merz's T-shirt? You better hope he doesn't take his shirt off. But what Lavrov was doing was saying, we liberated the world from the Third Reich. We are Russia. We turned the tide of the Second World War, and if it was not for us, every one of you European Social Democrats would be speaking in Russia. German. The Netherlands, which surrendered in 48 hours. The French, who folded like a cheap deck chair. Only Britain stood alone for almost an entire year. But who won the war? Which army prevailed in Berlin? Which army crushed the beast of fascism in the rubble of Berlin? That's what Lavrov was saying. And I think that Trump understood that. I think that Trump handled this whole thing not just with courage, but with grace. I thought the way he received the second most militarily powerful man in the world was respectful as it should have been. What did you want Trump to do? Walk away from Putin? Refuse to shake his hand? Do you people know anything at all about diplomacy? Do you people know anything at all about what you need to do in order to bring wars to an end? Evidently not. The media in the West was dripping with venom towards Russia. And if Trump disappoints these European Social Democrats tomorrow, if he tells them the war's over, if you want to keep the war going, you send your armies, you send your money, you send your material, because we are out of here. This was Biden's war, and Trump is going to walk away from it. And if Zelensky doesn't accept the kind of concessions and the kind of changes, demographic changes, geographic changes to the new reality, then heaven help him, because we certainly won't be. And so we've got to speculate as to what it was that was decided between the two leaders in Alaska, because neither of them have said anything meaningful, substantive about what was decided in the talks. None of them have indicated what issues remain to be resolved. Our guest tonight, Afshin Rattansi, will have more of an insight than me and you, for I have virtually none. All I know is this: they didn't speak for 135 minutes without coming to some meaningful conclusions. They did not meet and agree to meet again quickly without some idea that some kind of meaningful, workable deal is potentially in the bag. But it could all be scuppered, not just by the Europeans, but by little Zelensky. If he turns up in his combat fatigues again, I'd say the war is going on. If he turns up in what passes for a suit, it might be that we have a ball game. What will that ball game look like? Well, those areas that are now constitutionally a part of the Russian Federation will never be relinquished. That much I can certainly say. I'm not sure what will happen in the territories where complete Russian control does not yet exist, although at the pace of developments on the battlefield, that may not be long delayed. So hurry up, Zelensky. But the republics that are now a part of the Russian Federation will remain there. Crimea will remain there. Guarantees for Kaliningrad will have to be given. Guarantees that the rump Ukrainian state will never join NATO. Ukraine will never be in NATO, and NATO will never be in Ukraine, will have to be given. And something that is frequently overlooked deliberately by Western commentators: there will have to be an election in Ukraine, because Zelensky is not the legitimate president of Ukraine, and therefore cannot sign any peace agreement with Russia. Only a duly elected president of the Ukraine can do that. So a change at the top in Kiev will be necessary. Constitutional protection for the Russian nationals, ethnic Russians, Russian-speaking people in Ukraine will have to be constitutionally guaranteed. The Russian language will have to be an official language in Ukraine. Essentially, for older viewers, Ukraine will have to be Finlandized, i.e. not a part of the bloc of the former USSR, but neutral to the nth degree, as it was during the Cold War. And therefore Helsinki was an important place, was a meaningful place in international relations. A Finlandized, neutral, non-NATO rump Ukraine will have to be accepted, or the war will go on. I feel sure that Donald Trump, besotted as he is with the possibility of winning the Nobel Peace Prize, like his nemesis, Obama, is fully seized of these realities. I believe the American government, the top brass, are fully seized on the need to bring an end to this conflict, and fully seized of the fruits of the resumption of economic relations with the Russian Federation. Russia's an immensely rich place. Its precious metals, its minerals, its oil and gas, and above all, its land. Land undreamt of in any other country. Russia, the biggest country in the whole world, and whole parts of it completely empty, are a real prize for someone with the sense to see economic cooperation as a more profitable bet for them than economic, political, and military confrontation. I told you that Afshin Rattansi, the host of Going Underground, is going to be our guest tonight. He'll know one or two of the inside track material. So, I'm coming back. 20 seconds. It's the mother of all talk shows.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, the poll tonight, who won at the Alaska summit? It's a bit of a false dichotomy in my opinion, but was it Trump or was it Putin? 18,202 of you have already voted, and sorry, Donald, the vast majority are very clear so far. But there's plenty of time to influence that vote. You can vote on my Telegram, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Give a thumbs up to the show and tell all your contacts that you are watching us. It's toll-free, by the way, to call the show. I hope to get a lot of calls in tonight. In the US and Canada, toll-free, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Well, one man who followed the Alaskan adventures so closely that I'll be amazed if he doesn't dazzle us all with an insight or two into what went on there and what's likely to happen in Washington tomorrow. It's the one and only Afshin Rattansi. Afshin, welcome back to the show. A word or two on our colleagues in the media first, if you will. On one level, it was funny to watch them. My instinct was to shout, "Cry more, cry me a river." But on the other hand, this must have an impact on public opinion in these Western countries when they are fed a relentless diet of war propaganda and calumny about Putin, about Russia, and against Trump for meeting him. It's a sad state of affairs. These are just stenographers for NATO, aren't they?
Absolutely. Happy birthday, George, for yesterday. And I suppose the meeting
Thank
must
you.
have been held in Alaska, especially for your birthday, clearly. Yes, the NATO nation media was revealed as if we didn't know, as sick and depraved. Their reporters, their newsrooms. It was astonishing to see their absolute confusion as they had to contend with the perhaps opportunity for some kind of peace, some kind of end to the mass killing that has continued over generations now from these NATO countries. They will eventually presumably be confused when the cameras are let into Gaza for us all to see, even through their appalling camera lenses, the genocides. So they can't understand or comprehend why anyone would ever want to shake the hand of Vladimir Putin, lest the idea of a red carpet being rolled out to the leader of the largest country on earth, the leader of the largest economy in Europe by purchasing power parity. They don't comprehend it. They still believe that Russia is nothing but a gas station, and that its economy is falling apart. Hopefully, the audiences of the immiserated countries of the European Union and Britain will understand how they must switch off their television sets when it comes to watching these appalling mainstream news broadcasts that are dedicated to losing the blood and losing the lives of their viewers.
Is it money, Afshin? I mean, are they like this because there's money in it? Or are they all fully paid up cold warriors that haven't noticed that communism no longer exists in Russia?
I think it starts with their educations, isn't it? They disproportionately take from the elite classes of their respective nations. I mean, American media, outright nepotism and related directly to the CIA and for MSNBC, often called MSN CIA, all those remnants of the social democrat ideas of how the world works and how world history has worked since the end of the Second World War. Everything they understand of the world is seen through a lens of not understanding the catastrophes that have happened since 1945 at the behest of these NATO countries as they try to destabilize nations in Latin America. Many people watching the Bolivia election, from which we get the batteries for every mobile phone on Earth. Evo Morales not allowed to run. They have no understanding of the destabilization of Africa, of Southeast Asia. And so why would they understand that there was a coup in 2014? They can only say that's a Russian talking point. And then trying to understand it, they keep quoting Russian media. They don't ever say, we have to quote Russian media to you because we have access to it. But of course, there's no free speech in Western Europe because they banned Russian media. Why should they be allowed to see Russian media if the people they're broadcasting to are not?
Now, let's go to Alaska then and just try and understand what it was that they discussed there, and more importantly, what they agreed there. Presumably the long talks, 3 hours of talks with Witkoff, less than a week before, laid out the bones of what they were going to discuss, and the flesh was put on at the summit between the two leaders in Alaska. What do you think the bones and the flesh look like?
I think we're hoping that Steve Witkoff, the real estate agent, golf partner of Donald Trump, and the ultra-hawkish Marcorubio, who has always supported the proxy war on Russia, hopefully they don't know what they're talking about, because in the past few hours they've been speaking on the morning shows in the United States, and some of it, I mean, we're all slightly optimistic, of course, that at last talks have begun. But then occasionally they utter statements that seem so divorced from the way the proxy war is progressing, you start to worry. So why would Witkoff have said some kind of Article 5-like security guarantee could be given to Ukraine? Well, no. If there was an Article 5-like security guarantee given to Ukraine from a Trump administration that is known to renege on negotiations, Pache, the bombing of Iran while negotiations were actually going on, that kind of security guarantee would necessarily lead to the end of the world. We mustn't forget what the stakes are here. The stakes literally are the end of the world. And then we hear Rubio saying there were no other elements of the conversations in Alaska related to other parts of world flashpoints. So Gaza wasn't mentioned, that means, and the START treaties weren't mentioned. You would think, and I think a lot of us were hoping, and hopefully Secretary of State Rubio is lying, and in fact there was some element of a possible resumption of START treaty negotiations, because we're now living in the shadow of, at any moment a mistake can be made, a flock of pigeons or geese, which could trigger a nuclear strike, because all nuclear disarmament talks are off. So one hoped that those things were also on the table. And as regards Donetsk, we presume that Donetsk, this was denied now by Rubio after previous leaks that were emerging from the talks, that in fact these 5 regions that Russia already has will be returned to Russia. Because we must remember, the reason why there's no ceasefire and the absurd idea of the dwarves, you commented in your monologue about the 7 dwarves, how neat there were 7, by the way, that are going to Washington. There can be no ceasefire because obviously Russia are winning and will win the war. Why would a ceasefire ever be agreeable to Moscow, given that would just give the chance for Zelensky, the dictator Zelensky, to rearm? So therefore, a full peace agreement is what is required, and that's the Trump administration's position.
Yeah, and they seem to have accepted that there will be no ceasefire without a peace agreement. So the demand of Zelensky and the dwarfs that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire is now no longer the American position. America has accepted that this will have to be resolved with a peace agreement rather than a ceasefire prior to that. So that's some kind of advance. If they didn't discuss START, they didn't discuss Gaza, they didn't discuss Iran, they must have then spent 135 minutes on Ukraine. If what is now being said by Witkoff, by Rubio, the Article 5 business, and so on, if these are true, there will be no agreement and probably no second round of talks. But if this is all just political public relations bluster, then when these things are not agreed in a second round of talks, Trump will be building up even more aggro for himself in the sofa shows on the Sunday mornings and with the Democrats and the Miss Lindsey Grahams of this world in his own party. So it's hard to know why Witkoff and Rubio are briefing these kind of things.
I mean, of course, some have it that Trump is doing this to deflect from the Epstein hearings, which will be making headlines in the United States over the next 72 hours. Of all people, former Attorney General Bill Barr, whose father gave Epstein his first job, is due to testify in congressional hearings. But, I mean, if one tries to look kindly on Trump, given what J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance has said in the past about Western Europe's lack of freedom of expression, could it be possible that this is at last a way to tear the United States away from Western Europe, which is so hell-bent on its own destruction? The leaders and the elite classes of the Western Europe so hell-bent on self-destruction, so that these seven dwarves, as you call it, no offense to people who are height challenged, they are told, look, you're on your own. And Trump has hinted at this. You can do what you like. We're not going to. I mean, the idea of sanctions still reverberated in the morning shows in the past couple of hours, London time, which was quite odd, because India was very clear in saying that they would continue to import Russian energy. And actually, one thing that it seemed that was put forward and on the Rupert Murdoch's Fox channel, where the commentators, one has to say, are all might as well be Biden commentators on Rupert Murdoch's channel, because Rupert Murdoch himself is part of that system. They, at least on Fox, raised the idea that why is it Western Europe is continuing to import Russian energy, and would secondary sanctions hit Germany and some countries in Western Europe that continue to enjoy Russian energy? And of course, Zelensky is paid by the transit fees that Russia pays to the Ukrainian government.
So you mentioned the dwarves, and again, as you say, no offense to the midgets of the world. They're on the plane now. Why is Trump letting them in, first of all? What role are they likely to play? And I suppose, most importantly, is Trump going to scatter them, or is he going to succumb to them?
It wasn't clear, was it? I mean, you watching from London must have despaired at the idea of a British Prime Minister. I mean, think of a different world in which the British Prime Minister would have held the talks between Trump and Putin in England. Who knows? At one of Prince Charles's palaces, King Charles's palaces. Britain could have had a role to play as a global, post-Brexit leading nation. It wasn't clear at the beginning why these seven, Keir Starmer, Meloni, Merz, Stubb, your favorite Finnish leader, who lots of people are saying Trump really likes because he plays golf very well. Macron, Rutte, the failed Dutch politician who's now Secretary General of NATO, and Ursula von der Leyen, no Kaja Kallas, that would have made 8, you see. Why? Why are they going? And then Rubio in the past few hours has said they're coming at Trump's invitation, which is strange, because initially the whole point was a one-on-one with Zelensky. Then there are reports that there is no way these seven are going to be let in to the initial talks with Trump. They then come in later. It's going to be great fun, isn't it, watching on Monday, because there is the possibility that, well, especially from a BRICS nation point of view and a global South point of nation, that the genocidal states of Western Europe, with such a history and legacy of blood on their hands, of such genocide on their hands, are finally going to be cleaved away from the United States, and there won't be an Atlantic alliance to that is a possibility, where Trump realizes the future is anyway in Southeast Asia, and the Chinese century, China ahead of the United States when it comes to GDP by PPP. The United States is the second most powerful economic nation. That would be a sight to see on Monday, wouldn't it?
Indeed, I've been dreaming of that all of my life, and trying to work for that all of my life. But let's look on the other side of that. He's making a rod for his own back. if he instructs Zelensky to end the war and does so by saying, because I'm no longer a part of it and you can't fight it without me, then he's then going to have the 7 dwarves swarming around in that Oval Office. Lucky they're very small, so they'll be able to get them all in. And they'll be snarling and squawking against Trump, and he's making a public relations rod for his own back. If, on the other hand, he succumbs, he's the mouse rather than the man, then all these gloating social democrats are going to have pulled a real fast one over Donald Trump, and the Nobel Peace Prize will be no more.
Why does he want the Nobel Peace Prize anyway? Why does he want a prize that Obama once won, the butcher of Libya? Who knows? Who understands that element? I mean, surely Trump, on the one hand, Trump realizes that he can stop all the security assistance in terms of navigation and the satellite aid help for dictator Zelensky's troops. He'd have to ask his friend Elon Musk to switch off the Starlink, which is used by Zelensky's troops. And it doesn't matter how much aid Britain gives. I don't know how rich Britain is. The poor of Britain must be very rich for Britain to afford all these giveaways for 100 years to Zelensky. They're rendered obsolete by the United States switching off the intelligence sharing, as it's called. No amount of numbers of MI6 and British special forces that are apparently being killed every other week by Russian troops will be able to survive without the intelligence gathering support from outer space. But on the other hand, we remember that these elites are powered by a huge military, economic, industrial complex in which powerful armaments industry lobbying, upon which they depend not only to commit the genocide in Gaza, they also depend on Ukraine, which has been a fantastic opportunity for these massive companies. I know that Rheinmetall, the largest weapons manufacturing publicly traded company in Germany, shares have been dropping. But how powerful are all these lobby groups? We know from K Street in Washington, D.C., the huge hoardings proudly displaying how every senator and every congressman is a paid-up servant of the arms industry. Could that be pushed to make Trump bow down not just to the dwarves, but to the industry that pays those dwarves? Ultimately, it is the powerlessness and the weakness of the working classes of Western Europe to allow themselves to be immiserated by these elites, which gives them that power, which has arguably more power than the Oval Office. Is that the question?
Now, finally, Afshin, a more difficult question, difficult to answer because we're not in Russia, we don't get allowed to watch Russian media and so on. But if Putin settles this for measurably less than the Russian war aims, a war which has cost Russia in blood and treasure and diplomatic and other disruption very dearly, if Putin were to settle this well short of the war aims of Russia, repeatedly stated, what would be the repercussion, the implication for internal Russian politics on this? We never get to hear, really, from Russian public opinion.
That's right. And it should be said, there's a BBC and Sky reporter wandering around the streets of Moscow. The Russians allow these reporters from these organizations. I suppose it's laudable, even though it sticks in our craw. But I know both of us, George, have been very critical of Vladimir Putin over the years as regards Ukraine. And I think Putin and Lavrov know it completely. That what we have been criticizing the Russian government for so many years, the gullibility over Minsk, the gullibility that has followed since 2014 and over many other geographical points of conflict and contact. So presumably, they realize now that they are only there by virtue of the popular opinion of the Russian people. There is no way Vladimir Putin would be president of Russia without the support of Russia's people, the largest country on earth. Unlike Zelensky, the Gallup poll in Ukraine shows that a majority favor a peace agreement, what Putin and Trump want and what they negotiated in Alaska. And as for the people of Ukraine, they weren't allowed to elect Zelensky when his term ran out. So Putin knows that he answers to the Russian people, and he sent many Russian sons and daughters to their deaths in the fight for the existential fight for Russia, because this is what NATO and what the Biden administration, the Obama administration wanted to do to Russia. There's no doubt that if Trump does cede anything to the seven dwarves in Washington in the next 24 hours, if there's anything less than Donetsk, and I mean, at least these NATO countries have stopped talking about Crimea, the absurdity of Crimea becoming part of some rump Ukraine. No, it's over. The nice guy Putin days are over. So what the Western media commentators call as maximalist, the Russians see as justice, and it's understood by the majority of all humankind. If the United States, if the Western European powers don't seem to be able to concede anything, so they're lost causes. But if the United States, if the Trump administration doesn't concede to Russian demands, that's why they said they're going to concede nothing. It means for a very dangerous world.
I personally believe the war will go on, Afshin. I don't think it's going to end in a peace agreement. What's your take?
It depends on what Trump can threaten the European Union and Britain with. He could threaten them with tariffs. Who knows? We know how weak these people are. I met Keir Starmer at a BBC flagship program. He refused to shake my hand. I don't know, he's too frightened. You must have met him occasionally, I presume. They're very weak people. Keir Starmer, Meloni, Merz. They're hated in their own countries. Surely they'll do what Trump wants them to do, what J.D. Vance wants them to do. The worrying thing is the people inside the tent, John Ratcliffe of the CIA and Marcorubio. Are they actual plants from the deep state?
Well, thanks very much for your insights. We'll keep a close eye on it and a close ear on Going Underground. Afshin Rattansi, host of Going Underground, a must-watch for any discerning viewer. Let me take a quick break, then your calls. First one from Bermuda, coming up right after this. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan, and he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio, and he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man, and the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, the numbers are growing on the poll, but the margin, Donald, I'm afraid, is not changing. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And it's 5% say Trump on Telegram, 15% say Trump on X, 8% say Trump on the community poll, and only 5% say Trump on the YouTube stream. So, Donald, you better get your people voting if you want to change that tally. Let's go, as I said, to Bermuda. Who wouldn't? Where Rolf wants to talk about Putin and Trump. Go ahead, Rolf.
Hey, George, how are you today?
By the grace of God, good. Nice to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say this, that I don't think people should vote for Putin because, after all, he's the devil incarnate, according to most Western media. Of course, now, as you mentioned, George, you have the fact that Bibi Netanyahu is considered, of course, one of the saviors of Western civilization. So if he was in the poll, you have to vote for Bibi, I guess. Yeah, just imagine, George, how you can have people from the MI6, the guys at Chatham House, the neocons from Washington, and Mossad all in the room making up these false narratives and then sending them out to the media they control in most of these Western countries. That's the world we live in. Just moving on, George, I just want to say this. I feel for the Ukrainian people. They have been used by the U.S. and the neocons as proxies. And they're now reaching the fate of all proxies ultimately. I hope Israel is hearing this. Because all they've been doing there is trying to destroy Russia, dismember it, whatever adjective you want to use, so they can then pivot to Asia and take on China. You won't believe it, but that's how they're thinking, George. You know it and I know it. This is at the same time when you have the 5,000-pound bombs. Over 5,000 of them were shipped to Israel. They're worrying about the little booty they can get from Ukraine, while at the same time, Keir Starmer, the U.S. president, and all the rest of them are all in on killing as many Palestinians as they can while dispossessing them so that they can do what they want with the land. I mean, you can't make this up. This is the world we are in, George, and you have pointed that out so many times.
Yeah, we don't need to make it up. It's the reality. I made the point earlier about Pelosi. All these Western American broadcasters talking about what a disgrace, giving Putin a red carpet welcome, are the same people who lie down on the pavement to allow Netanyahu to walk over them. Never mind a red carpet welcome. Thanks, Rolf, getting us off to a flying start. Now you can make comments on YouTube if you scan the QR code on the screen now, and I'll try and read them out. Stonyman694 says tomorrow's meeting in card-holding parlance can be summed up as one between the knave of spades and two jokers with the ace of clubs. Karaoke Star says there's no comparison with Putin and Trump. Putin is a leader, Trump is a gangster. And David Greenwood says Putin's English was pretty good. Time we made Russian and maybe Chinese compulsory languages in our secondary school. I've spoken English with Vladimir Putin. How about that then? I could have told you his English was pretty good. And duly noted sends $5 US. Thank you very much, sir. Says warmongers will say no peace was accomplished, but we know that they never have patience for diplomacy, leading to peace and all the time for war. Rob Sutton says, I hope Trump kips Starmer in the balls. We might as well get some entertainment from the warmongers. I'm not sure he's got balls. Khaled is in Nova Scotia in Canada on Palestine. How's that for the global university of the airwaves? Khaled, welcome.
Thank you, George. I'm so happy to be able to get on your show. I'm a latecomer to your show. I just found about you accidentally, basically, through scamming through YouTube over the last, say, 6 months or so. And I must tell you, I'm thoroughly impressed with you. Now, I met Yasser Arafat about 50 odd years ago. I met him in Mecca. I met him along with Zial al-Haq and so on. At the time, I was imam. Actually, I was the first imam in Bermuda. So I'm from Bermuda, like Rolf. And so I did connect with him. In fact, he invited me to come to fight with him in Palestine, and I disagree with him because at the time I thought that they were only using him for reason, for justification, to bomb and to kill. But now, learning the real history and the depth of this Mossad and whatever that Zionism is, there, they didn't need a reason. They don't need a reason at all. They just simply murder almost as a sport, as a purpose, as a raison d'etre. So anyway, but really the reason I'm calling George is I think that from a religious perspective, I'm coming here from a spiritual religious perspective, what is really needed is our humanity needs to be risen. The whole idea of religion, the whole idea is to make a human, and to make a human with feelings, with sensitivity. And what you display as an individual is the kind of sensitivity that religion is trying to create. You know, your passion. You know, it's not about some ecclesiastical view of what a person looks like. You know, wearing a thobe or wearing a robe or wearing this or looking like this or looking like that or having a beard or whether it's colored with henna or what. It's not about that. It's not about how many surahs or how many verses you know. It's your faith can be measured by the tears, by your tears. When you see a baby hurt or a weak individual being bullied, you know, your sensitivity, your anger, your himma raises and anger to rush to the aid of that soul, that person that's been oppressed. It's that character that needs to be raised around the globe. So religion is about that.
Amen to that, Khalid. That's the spirit in which you and I believe. It's the spirit, if prevailing, would end the never-ending conflicts in the world and the misery and unhappiness and disparity and inequality and all the repression that we find around the world. If everyone, you know, there's a lot of people, including in my own circle, who are not religious people. But I always say to them, if the world kept the 10 Commandments, would we be a better world or a worse one? And there's only one answer to that, Khalid. I'm grateful to you, especially as I lost you. You kept on going, and I'm grateful for that. Now, time for tonight's Wall of Fame. A huge thanks to the big MOATS donors who visited the MOATS.tv website this week. And boy, were they generous. Rasmus Pedersen, Zafar Sharif, C.E. McDermott, Giuliani Lira, and Nadim Muhez Inovich. Please, thanks for what you've given. Please, everyone take a lead from them and become a MOATS donor tonight. Go to MOATS.tv. While I go to Toronto, staying in Canada, where Alex wants to talk about the standard of American leaders. I'm always up for that, Alex. Go ahead.
Hi, George. I wanted to call to express my opinion that U.S. politicians never veer from that Wall Street narrative. I've had some unique first-hand experiences with the inability of U.S. politicians to negotiate anything at all. And I'd like to tell you at least one of my first-hand experiences with American negotiators. This goes back to South Korea, where I ran a travel agency for 10 years. And if you remember back in 2003, they started the six-party talks. And my travel agency dealt with embassy staff, including U.S. embassy people, and I had a chance to meet these teams. And, of course, I told them, how are the negotiations going? But they told me that they showed up there, but they were not able to discuss any easing of restrictions or anything else until North Korea first unconditionally dismantled their entire nuclear arsenal. In other words, they had all stick but no carrot. And I said, well, how is this possible? They go, well, that's what we're doing. So I said, you're not negotiating, you're browbeating. And they agreed. But they had strong restrictions. The law of the land was laid out that you simply must browbeat these people, and if they fail, they fail, but you don't have any room to negotiate. And I'm afraid I think the same thing's going for Trump. I really don't believe that he's allowed to speak freely and do what he wants, especially when he's surrounded by those Wall Street sycophants like Marcorubio and Hegseth. And I'm afraid that, as Brian Berletic used to say, it's a continuity of agenda. And I just don't think it's anything more but a publicity stunt when you see somebody like Donald Trump meeting with anybody.
Well, you might be right, and we'll know soon enough. It's not going to be an aeon before we know whether this war is coming to an end or not. Of course, I want it to come to an end. Of course, I'd be delighted if Donald Trump disappointed those who say that the American president is merely a puppet anyway, that other people call the shots, make the decisions. I only make this point to you that from what we know of Donald Trump's personality, he doesn't seem like the sort of guy that would not be saying what he believed at that moment in time. Problem is, he believed something different a moment before and different again a moment from now. But at that moment, it seems to me that Donald Trump speaks freely, speaks far too much. And it's one of the reasons why he veers so dramatically from one position to another, which wouldn't happen if he just sat down in his office and got a pen out and did some work. His job is not to perpetually run off at the mouth, but that is perpetually what he does. But if I was in K Street, or if I was in the MIC, military industrial complex, or if I was in the lobby of any of Wall Street or any other powerful interest group, I would not be sure that I could dictate to Donald Trump. I would definitely have been sure I could dictate to Joe Biden. He probably wouldn't even have known that I was there. But Trump seems to me a person with a big personality who wants to bring wars to an end for his own self-aggrandizement, apart from many other reasons. And if I'm right on that, then he is genuinely trying to end the Ukraine war. I don't believe that he will succeed, because I don't believe that the Chihuahuas that are on their way to the White House now will allow him to do that, and he'll be overwhelmed by the pressure from all these interest groups who want to keep the war going. And somebody called Stubb will be the last straw only. That's how it looks to me. But you might be right, Alex, and Brian Berletic, a highly respected commentator, does indeed have that view. I don't myself agree with it, because it runs out of the same stable that says that men don't make history, that leaders are not all that they are cracked up to be, that invisible hands and invisible forces shape the events that we eventually have to live through. Of course, leaders are only part of the picture, but you need leaders. Of course, presidents are not all powerful, but that doesn't mean you should settle for a mediocre president when you could have a better one. It doesn't mean that Jack Kennedy and Joe Biden are the same thing. It doesn't mean that they're the same powerless thing. If that were true, we wouldn't actually be meeting now. You wouldn't be listening to me now, because the world would have ended at the Cuban Missile Crisis. It only didn't end at the Cuban Missile Crisis because Kennedy overwhelmed the military-industrial complex, the CIA, and all the other three-letter agencies. They wanted war over the Cuban missiles. Kennedy did not want war, and there was no war. Controversial point of view, I know. More than happy to take any calls on it. Let me take a quick break, then Simon in London on Ukraine fraud is coming up after this short break. Stay tuned. There's a legend on the line in Oklahoma. It's May on Trump. Welcome back, May.
Trump is using a magic 8-ball to make his decision. He apparently has completely lost whatever mind he had to begin with. This is just ridiculous. Does he really think anyone's going to believe that? I'm here to say, and I'm here to join you and everybody else, the emperor has no clothes on. He's as naked as they come. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he got naked with some young people. And that is why he so desperately is trying to kill this whole Epstein thing. And he's just making it worse.
I'm wondering when Donald Trump knew that he was implicated in these Epstein files and what it was that he knew. That's the big question, because he wouldn't have been banging the Epstein drum all this time and then suddenly to pull the rug. That tells me that it was a late decision, that someone came late to Trump to say, you know, you really don't want to be doing that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Who won at the Alaska summit, Trump or Putin? Vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Big numbers now, but no change. No more takers for Donald Trump as the winner. Let's hear from Simon in London about a little discussed issue that will, after the war, become very important indeed, namely the issue of gigantic fraud in Ukraine, the theft of your money, dear viewer. Simon, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Hi, George. Hope you're well, mate. Yeah, well, when this war began, the Europeans and the UK specifically were urging people to give money to the Ukraine. We, of course, as you know, pledged billions of pounds of taxpayers' money into the Ukraine war. However, considering the sycophancy that these people showed to Joe Biden and Vladimir Zelensky, there's something we're not being told about here, you know? And even now, people have got to question, why is it that even when Donald Trump has got a ready-to-go peace deal almost, you know, it's not agreed yet, but he's confident there's going to be a peace deal. You know, there's something we're not being told. Now, many people in Europe believe this hype so much. I came on your show in 2022, if you remember, and I told you that people were putting photographs on LinkedIn saying that it's their day job to kill a Russian, was smiling with guns without realizing the full horrors of the war, you know? And I myself found myself suspended from LinkedIn for a while just for questioning the Ukraine war and asking where COVID actually came from. Now, but the question, however, is why is it that Europeans are so desperate for this war to continue, you know? Is it because, foolishly, they put all our pension funds, both state and private. Now, remember, we already know that the pension age in the UK is going to increase, so we'll have poor sick, elderly 68 years old, you know, people competing with teenagers for jobs in Starbucks and Costa Coffee, you know? God help them, you know? And if that's the case, then what have they done with the money? You know, have they bet it on a double or nothing in hope that it'll increase? You know, many people are going to be affected by this. You know, many people are going to be working very, very late in their lives as a result of this. You know, and many people. This is the thing, George. Many people are uncomfortable when we bring this up. I've actually been told. I'm not going to say who, but I've actually been told previously not to bring this up because it'll upset too many people. You know, and just to carry on with the flow. You know, that's how upset people are. And you know as well as I do, George. I mean, you've done a lot of history. You've had a lot of history with Robert Maxwell. You know, Robert Maxwell, before he committed suicide, he actually gave away the pension funds. He actually did fraud with the pension funds. Isn't it a fair question to ask? Ask this thing about the pensions. You know, if our pensions are being gambled in the Ukraine war.
If I was in Parliament, I definitely would ask it, but nobody else is asking it because they don't want to touch the Ukraine war. Even, I don't want to name names, but even the people who in the past would have been all over this subject don't talk about Ukraine because they don't want to touch the issue. They don't want to express opposition to NATO. They don't want to sound like they are supporting Russia. So nobody in Parliament is doing this. Absolutely nobody. If I were in Parliament, of course I would be raising this, just in parenthesis. It wasn't that Robert Maxwell committed suicide. He was, I think, murdered. And that's the one thing I have in common with Ghislaine Maxwell, his daughter. Both of us believe that Robert Maxwell was murdered. Murdered or suicide. I was just explaining to someone yesterday, my good friend Imtiaz, that I had sued the Mirror, having revealed a very great deal about the venality of Robert Maxwell, underprivilege in Parliament. Robert Maxwell launched a massive attack on me in no less than 7 different newspapers that he then owned and controlled. And so I sued, and the group's legal position, of course, disappeared into the drink with Robert Maxwell, because within days, if not hours, the truth of what I had alleged about Robert Maxwell was more than amply confirmed. Secondly, he didn't give away the pension of the Mirror Group pensioners. He stole the pensions of the Mirror Group pensioners, and most of them never got anything like what they had paid into the pension fund back again. So Maxwell was the greatest thief of the 20th century in Britain, and there's a lot of competition for that title. Now, on to your overarching point. Why is it that these European dwarfs are so desperate for this war to continue? And you advance as a hypothesis a perfectly credible one, but it will not be the only one. We simply don't know, because we have no parliamentary scrutiny of the executive on this subject. We have no parliament, effectively. We don't know where they found the 13 billion that they've already sent Zelensky. We don't know how they have accounted for, in our books, the pledge of 3 billion per year for the next 100 years. We have no idea. But more urgent and important, we have no idea what Ukraine did with all the money. But Trump does. Trump said the last time Zelensky met him in the Oval Office, and has said subsequently, that we have sent hundreds of billions to Ukraine for weapons, and I'm not sure, said Trump, that it all went on weapons. Well, that's the understatement of the century. It's abundantly clear that there has been gigantic fraud in Ukraine, which has benefited some of the American politicians who helped the Ukrainians commit that fraud. It's a kickback, it's a vicious circle where the Americans give their public money to Zelensky, and Zelensky gives some of it back into the political process in America, into the political system, so that the whole thing can keep going. What we do know is that there is a pattern of lavish spending and extravagance in the Zelensky circle. It's reported today. I can't vouch for it. I don't have the proof of it. But it's quite authoritatively alleged that Zelensky is now the owner of a French bank for which President Emmanuel Macron once worked. It is abundantly clear, there have been legal cases even in Ukraine, that leading officials, and even quite junior officials in the second rank of the Ukrainian state, have made off with tens, if not scores of millions of dollars, and have salted it away in foreign countries, offshore, in the Caribbean banking black holes and all the rest of it. That much is clear. And when the anti-corruption agency of Ukraine itself decided that it was going to conduct certain investigations that were too close to home, too close for comfort for Zelensky, he shut them down. He abolished the anti-corruption agency in Kiev. Now, this is not just a Zelensky thing, this is a Ukrainian thing. Every Western newspaper of note regularly used to tell us that Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe. It didn't get less corrupt because hundreds of billions of European and North American money was poured into it. It got more corrupt. And Trump knows where the money is. I'm certain that he knows. And maybe even that'll be used against Zelensky in the negotiations tomorrow. Now, our podcast is going great guns. It's in the top 40 in Japan. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? An English language politics show is in the charts in Japan, in South Africa, in the Netherlands, and in Spain. And how about this one? On Indonesia Independence Day, and a big congratulations to them. I was listening to Sukarno's speech in 1960 to the United Nations. Only this very day, and a very fine address it was too. On Indonesian Independence Day, the MOATS podcast is #1 in the charts in Indonesia. We're in Romania and Turkey also in the top of the pops. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can also, of course, listen to it on our website, moats.tv, because, well, you're going there, right, to leave your $1, €1, £1, without which we cannot continue to broadcast. Let's go back to Canada. A lot of Canada this evening. Alan is in Canada on the MSM. Go ahead, Alan.
Good evening, George. I go back to watching you in your debates with Christopher Hitchens some years ago.
Okay, that was a good one. The grapple in the apple.
Back when people could disagree and have dialogue and, change each other's opinions and move the needle one way or another, like these days. No,
nobody would face me in a debate now, Alan. That's the problem. Hitchens' ego would not allow him to refuse to debate against me, but nobody else will debate now against me, even if I offer to pay for the Albert Hall myself, one after the other. They're too scared.
Knock him down like in a shooting gallery.
Anyway, go on, sir.
My question is about the media and the state of it. I watched this morning on Fox News, who you think would be trying to support Trump's effort in peace, and Maria Bartiromo, I'm sure you're familiar with her, interviewing our boy Marcorubio, and as he's going on giving his rhetoric, she says, well, if nothing happens this week with Zelensky and the European watchdogs, what's going to go on? Will the murder just continue? And the irony of it, mainstream media, as bad as they are, it's just the irony of it's one-sided. It's all implied Putin's murdering everybody, just like those little chihuahuas in Alaska that started barking at him on the podium there when he got off the plane on the red carpet. Yeah. It just seems there's no... Yeah. How did our media get to this state of, even for the mainstream, no decorum in Alaska, no objectivity or accountability, and they just talk to the audience as if we're a bunch of stupid masses in 1984. Do you have any thought or theory as how we got to that state?
Well, I think it's important to establish that it was never that great before. I think it was Lord Acton, 100 years ago nearly, who said, "Thank God you cannot bribe or twist the average British journalist, but when you see what unbribed he'll do, you realize there's no reason to." So it was never all that good before, but there was definitely more decorum. Journalists had at least the sense that they were being allowed into a Q&A, a question and answer session, and that they had to conduct themselves with a certain decorum. That definitely has gone. I'm not sure there ever was much objectivity, but clearly there was more than there is now. I asked this question of Afshin earlier. He can't give a full answer, neither can I. It's partly, I believe, money. They earn good money, these correspondents, these louche brothel creepers that pad around the world at their media company's expense. It's a good job being a foreign correspondent. The two that are in Moscow and that are openly allowed to work in Moscow, they can go up with their microphone and speak to anybody they like, and then they can twist it and edit it and broadcast it back home. But none of that can be done here in this country or in yours, because Russian media are simply not allowed to operate here. That's a kind of big difference. But the job is a good one. You're on all expenses paid. You pad around very profitably indeed. And I've seen some of their expenses sheets. Trust me, Fleet Street large S is not entirely gone in the television business. But it is what Afshin said it is. They are zealots for and believers in the neoliberal idea that Western capitalism is the prevailing orthodoxy, and that imperialist policy abroad is the prevailing worldview that they have. And this allows them to literally stand on their head. These are people who have supported Israel throughout 2 whole years of genocidal mass murder without opposing it ever at any time, who are able to, in their own minds at the same time, call Vladimir Putin a murderer, a killer.
Yeah.
Do you know that the number of children who have died in the Russia-Ukraine war is 0.3% of all the casualties? In Gaza, it's 21.3% of all the casualties. Maybe more, because I haven't been keeping score of the mass murder that's been going on over the last couple of weeks, because I've been focusing more on other things. So you ask, how can someone in one mind regard Netanyahu in one way and Vladimir Putin in a diametrically opposite way? It's very difficult to understand unless you two are schizophrenic. Thanks, Alan, in Canada. Here's some more comments. Boss Man Rocks says the US needs to stay out of this. The elites want the US involved so they can launder money through Ukraine. And Karen Colangelo says, USA here, we've been brainwashed to believe Russia is an enemy since we were very little people. Propaganda is just as bad in the US. Most Americans won't believe anything unless they see it on TV. And Daward 2500 says, Churchill famously said, the Americans can always be relied upon to do the right thing, but only after first trying every other alternative. Hilarious, but how true in this situation. Lotus Bloom in Grace, what a wonderful name, says, how is it that America took centuries to accumulate $37 trillion in debt, but sent Ukraine over $200 billion in 3 years? And Ukraine says it's still not enough. And Ukraine isn't even in NATO. And Abu Swalhe Musafir says, belated happy birthday to you, Gigi. Thank you. May you be back in Parliament soon, where your voice may resonate true in the midst of festering lies, deceptions. Amen. Amin, Abu, thank you for those kind words. I'll only be back in Parliament if there's a suitable by-election. As Nye Bevan said, where there's death, there's hope. My own country of Scotland is where Gary is. He wants to about Trump, Starmer, and Macron. Two of the seven dwarfs. Go ahead, Gaz.
Hello there, George. How are you? Greetings from Langham. It's just regarding the meeting tomorrow between Trump and the European Union, the European leaders, so-called. When they walk, he needs to say, "Thank you for coming, now sod off." That's what he needs to say to them. This war has been finished.
But is he going to do that, Gary? He's now saying they're coming at his invitation. Maybe that's just to save face, because they were coming anyway, and he would have been faced with slamming the door in their face. I don't know, but why did he bring them? What is the gain for him? If he's going to let Zelensky down, he's multiplying the aggro that will result, and up close and personal. They would have been fulminating in their own capitals. Instead, they're going to be fulminating in the Oval Office. If he's not going to let Zelensky down, gently or otherwise, well, the war continues, and his peacemaking effort has just been wrecked.
Yes, well, Trump needs to grow a backbone, George. This war's been done for at least 12 months. Russia's won, right? I'm a big admirer of Colonel Douglas McGregor. I watch a lot of his stuff on YouTube. The other day he said that the Ukrainian military have got maximum 90 days left and it's over. They're going to collapse. So Starmer and his little crew will go towards Washington, and it's the same old story, the same with Blair. They're willing to fight until the last drop of somebody else's blood. And the problem they've got is there's no money to be made in peace, I'm afraid. Peace is bad for business, whereas war, a lot of money to be made in war. But this war was finished a year ago. Everyone knows it. Putin just went yesterday to that meeting in Alaska out of politeness. He just went because it was a polite thing to do. He knows it's over. I don't know if Trump knows it's over, because he's surrounded by people who couldn't find Ukraine on a map. They haven't got a clue what's going on in Eastern Europe. So I would be surprised if Trump's getting even close to the true story from his so-called advisors, people who really wouldn't get a job as car park attendants who don't want in politics. So I think he's got to just say... Look,
I'm with you on that, and I'm not second to you on my admiration of Colonel Douglas McGregor, at least on issues of war and peace, and one or two other issues also, but some not so much. He must have come from around about our parts, Gary. Plenty of McGregors to be found in your area and mine. Let me take a quick break. Your calls next, right up to Gayatri with the social media news roundup. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As vicious as the Twitter sphere, where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to the Netherlands, the home country of my good wife, although she's Indonesian, really. Jarwan in the Netherlands on Russia. Yes, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Yes, thanks for taking my message of my call. I'd like to set two minor points straight. The Dutch didn't fight for 48 hours, but for 5 days. So a lot of German fighter pilots couldn't participate in the Battle of Britain. But all in all, it wasn't that much of a resistance. But I'd just like to set you straight on that one. But and the other one, Rutte is not a liberal. You mentioned that a couple of months ago. He's not a social democrat. He's a liberal. But I think if he would have been a social democrat from the Netherlands, it wouldn't have mattered to much more else. My main point is about propaganda, which is absolutely maddening here. The whole viewpoint about Russia here in the Netherlands, it's insane that even in my party, who has 5 seats, the Socialist Party, we still think that Russia is the bad guy, and demonstrations against the war turn out to be a pro-Ukraine demonstration. So I jumped ship to the Palestinian cause, in which my party, fortunately, is better.
Well, look, I don't stand corrected on your resistance in the Second World War. I wish that you had lasted for 5 days, because we wouldn't have been in such a pickle in Dunkirk if you had. Churchill bemoaned for the rest of the war that if you'd only lasted 3 more days. But we can agree to disagree on that. About the ontology of social democracy, from my point of view, liberals, conservatives, and so-called socialists are all social democrats. They are all basically a uni-party. So I draw no distinction between somebody who calls themselves a Christian Democrat, or in Britain a conservative, and someone who calls themselves Labour in Britain, or even in the Netherlands. I think it's a distinct political position, and it is the prevailing orthodoxy in Western European countries, and for that matter in Canada. The Democrats are a part of that nomenclature. That's my view. But the propaganda, as you rightly say, is literally off the charts. I mean, it's worse than it was in the Cold War. In the Cold War, at least, in the Labour Party in Parliament in Britain, don't forget, I was a member of Parliament whilst the Cold War was still going on, albeit it was coming to an end. There were always 10, 20, 30 people speaking up for peace, speaking up for an end to the demonization of Russia, the biggest country in Europe, the biggest country in the world, the biggest economy in Europe, the best performing currency against the dollar in the entire world this past 12 months. Why are we deliberately, willingly, willfully making Russia such an enemy that no good will ever be seen by you, by me, by even our children in our relations? This is worse than the Cold War. In the Cold War, we had dissident journalists, people like John Pilger in the English language press, who could be relied upon to challenge the assumptions of the Manichaean black and white zero-sum game assumptions of the prevailing orthodoxy. Now we have none. There are no journalists in the mainstream media, on television, or in print who do not buy and have not swallowed hook, line, and sinker the war propaganda. Indeed, they are the authors of that war propaganda. Go and consult Mr. Churchill on the Netherlands war effort. Thanks, Jorawan in the Netherlands. Now, a roll of honour for all of you who have been on to the MOATS.tv website tonight to support the show with a donation. Martin Shannon, Derek Marshall, Ron Grams, Roger Appleby, and Kamal Yassin. Please give 1, 10, or 20 euros, dollars, or pounds. It's easy to use the form. Don't take a free ride on me. I'm not being paid for being here. And if this show is to continue, we need more of your financial support. My goodness, Canada is watching us tonight. There must be nothing else on Canadian media That's probably true. Mohammed in Canada on Gaza. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Mr. Galloway, thank you for giving me another chance again. I just want to let you understand one thing that is really, really mind-boggling. It's not just the people in Gaza that are suffering this genocide or whatever happened there. I want to talk about how this is going to affect our kids. You know, most of the time when people goes to war, you hear them talk about PTSDs, right? And I do believe that seeing all these horrible things from Gaza and in the West Bank, all this, you know, like if you have, I don't even know what to say, like, because like most of the time, like I see children being killed, like all these images, like it affect people differently. So I don't know, like our government, like the Western governments, they really need to do something about this before it gets out of hand, and this thing take a toll.
Not much sign of that though, Mohammed. Your country says in September it will recognize a Palestinian state, but it doesn't say where that Palestinian state will be. Perhaps it will be in Manitoba. Perhaps it will be moved to Patagonia. I don't know what Palestinian state they're going to recognize, because you can't recognize a state that has no territory. You can't recognize a state that has no government, no sovereignty. You can't recognize a state that is occupied by another state. You have to unrecognize the state that is doing the occupying. The demand, I mean, I'm not against people recognizing a Palestinian state. In propaganda terms, it suits me. It drives Netanyahu mad, so what's not to love? But it would be far more meaningful to de-recognize Israel, to de-recognize the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine, and stop funding it, stop arming it, stop covering for it, stop shilling for it in your media. Thanks, Mohammed. Mark Tiller says, I love Galloway, but he's fooling himself regarding the Alaskan summit, the start of a Minsk III agreement. Magical, wishful thinking. Putin, Lavrov, or Gorbachev, Shevardnadze 2.0. But I'm not fooling myself. Didn't you listen? I told Afshin Rattansi, I don't believe that the Alaskan summit and a second meeting, if it happens, will bring about an end of the war. I believe this war will end on the battlefield. But as for Gorbachev and Putin, you obviously didn't know. You're too young to have known the clown that was Gorbachev, and you definitely don't know Putin. Alorag3143 sends $4.99. Thank you very much for that. Russia will end the war via the battlefield because Zelensky is controlled by Ukrainian Nazis and MI6. Alaska was pure theater. And Nell Lowe says the Russophobia in the West started when Putin opposed the invasion of Iraq. And Frankie Checkers says it's not woke to think that it's shitty to laugh at people who are of short stature. Would you laugh if it was one of your kids? I'm a big fan, but yeah, not cool. Okay. Dark Matter Zombies sends $100. How did we not know Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate was an ex-cop convicted of murder? Well, perhaps fortuitously, we're now going to New York, where Tom wants to talk about Starmer and Ukraine. Welcome, Tom.
George, it's an honor to speak with you, a fellow Manchester United fan. I want to talk to you about Mr. Starmer
well,
and Ukraine.
We were much better today, Tom. Tom, before you go on, don't be fooled by the score. Manchester United were overwhelmingly the better team today, and I'm filled with hope for this season, having seen that performance. On you go.
Thank you. I'm filled with hope as well. With regards to Mr. Starmer, isn't he the same guy that prosecuted Julian Assange? Isn't he the same guy who gave billions of quid to, while British pensioners were freezing, to Ukraine? And also there were large protests across the UK because they want to take away the inheritance, so farmers can't pass it down. So my saying is, there's going to be no money for fuel, going to be no food in the future. So how can this guy remain in office? I mean, he's 13%. His popularity is a fraction of what President Trump is. And I also want to make a point with regards to Ukraine. It must denazify, or it will risk becoming a modern-day Croatia. On July 5th of this year, 13% of the country, or 500,000 Croatians, attended a concert in Zagreb by neo-Nazi folk singer Marko Perkovic, whose stage name is Thompson, a 20th century machine gun. They use Nazi salutes, which are technically banned in Croatia. However, it was right before the 30th anniversary of the Storm Offensive on August 4th to 8th, 1995. NATO, the Croatian Ustaša, and Military Professional Resources Incorporated, MPRI, ethnically cleansed over 180,000 Serbs and killed 14,000 dead civilians in only 4 days. According to U.S. Army War College historian Dr. Craig Arnation, it was the largest ethnic cleansing operation of all the 1990 civil wars in the former Yugoslavia, Bosnia, Croatia, and so on. So I just wanted to make that point, that Ukraine must denazify, and that is an important point going forward. As you pointed out in your excellent monologue about Mr. Lavrov wearing the SSSR shirt, it wasn't about reclaiming the Soviet Union. It's about the Soviets beat the Nazis. Yes, America and Britain had key parts, and also, partisans and Chetniks in the former Yugoslavia and Greece were part of it. But Russia was the main sacrifice. 26 million dead.
I'm very grateful for that call, Tom. It went in a direction I was not expecting, but a perfectly correct one. Nazism is alive in Europe. It was alive in Croatia. The echo of the Ustaši, the mass murdering collaborators with the Nazis was clear and present in that field with that gigantic crowd. Nazism is clearly on the streets and calling the shots in Ukraine. Only fools deny that. And the same fools once told us that. The same BBC, the same Guardian, the same newspapers that used to feature color features of Nazism in Ukraine are now in a state of denial. Well, actually they're not. They know that it's true, but they're hoping you don't know that it's true. They're hoping to deceive you, when in truth, Zelensky's room for maneuver is so heavily circumscribed because of the immense military power inside the Ukrainian state of the Azov and the other fascist battalions. If Zelensky is murdered, he will not be murdered by the Russians. He'll be murdered by Ukrainian Nazis who've got the tattoos, who wave the swastikas, who proudly bear the death skull of the SS, who proudly revere Bandera and the other killers of 1 million Jews and Poles in the Holocaust of the East, who outdid the Einsatzgruppen, Nazi murderers, in the number of people that they killed. So what Lavrov was saying is true. And the educated people in the West must know that it's true. If I, an uneducated person, know that but for the victories of the Red Army and the immense sacrifice of that Red Army, I'd be speaking in German. We heard that argument I had with the Dutch fella. Did the Netherlands resist for 3 days or for 5? The French capitulated, despite Churchill flying back and forward in the fog of war to beg them to continue at least long enough for a proper evacuation to take place. Hitler would have conquered all of Europe. and his successors could still have been grinding their iron heels on our faces, but for the victories of the Red Army. All I ask is show some respect, for God's sake. Tom, thanks for that great call. Eileen is in Northern Ireland, wants to talk about Bertha von Suttner. Well, that's strangely specific, Eileen. Go ahead. And you, ma'am.
Yes, I've been reading up on Bertha for quite some time, and she keeps coming into my mind. But she herself, Bertha von Suttner, 1843 to 1914, was the first female recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. She and Alfred Nobel were close friends and remained friends all of their life. And she had reminded him by Jill ignited the effects of that, which was not his intention to be used at wartime, but it turned out that way, and we know how these things go. But Bertha herself was renowned for her meetings with individuals going back and forward to The Hague, etc. It was through Bertha that the Court of Arbitration was established, and there's actually a bust of Bertha at the front door, actually, when exiting the Peace Palace, because I had the privilege of going through it, escorted a number of years ago. I think we need to bring Bertha to the fore again in her comments on peace, and one which would come to mind would be, in fact, she wrote a book called Lay Down Your Arms. It's been translated into many languages, and that book seemed to have a lot of influence regarding the horrors of war, the reality of war. A fictional book, but very, very poignant. One of her comments would be, peace is achievable if humanity is prepared to lay down its arms. The greatest tragedy of war is not the loss of life, but the loss of humanity, which that gentleman referred to earlier. But if people could Google just her sayings for a start. There is a summer school each year, apparently. As I say, I've been to The Hague, I've been into the Peace Palace, I've seen the Peace Garden. It's a beautiful place to go to. But Bertha must be brought back again. We must bring Bertha back to life and light again, if that's possible.
Amen to that, Eileen. You educated me. I did not know of Bertha von Suttner. I'm sure that you educated some, at least, of our audience. Many will already have known of her, but it is extraordinary how peace has completely dropped out of the vocabulary of the political class and of the mainstream media. When I started in active politics, I've been in more or less full-time politics since 1973. I was in the Labour Party before that, but full-time since 1973. And I was in Parliament in a period in which peace was regularly on the lips of people like the late and great Tony Benn, Michael Foot, and others who preached against war. They preached for diplomacy. They preached for peace. And now you don't hear anyone talking about it or exalting those like Bertha who've written and talked about it. It's a dirty word, peace. You're accused of being an agent of foreign powers because you oppose the danger, deadly, fatal danger of nuclear war. I've seen in my lifetime that transformation, and it is not a good one. David is in Montreal. I tell you, Canada is right on our case this evening. On Ukraine and Alaska. David, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. I'll speak quickly to make sure I have time to say what I have to say without taking up too much time. The only substantive promises Trump has delivered on so far are the huge tax deductions to the rich, and also to make them permanent, and also disgusting behavior towards the undocumented immigrants. And it ends up with bad economic results for farmers, etc. He's worried about the economy, which looks very bad, that he has messed up the Epstein files, and also the 2026 congressional elections, where if they lose badly, he could get impeached. He seems to desperately need a win, and the people I respect, one of your callers talked about Douglas McGregor, among others, they believe he really wants to end the war. Huge obstacles, including Canada and Europe, but also in the United States. The public has been broadcast by the media that is controlled by the military-industrial complex, etc. his own donors. He has to make sure the profits continue. That's probably why he's saying they'll sell the arms to Europe. Congress, which has been bought, the same as him. He can't look weak. Europe, the irony is that apparently they resisted confronting Russia, and now they want to go. You're probably familiar with Mr. Ray McGovern, a former CIA criminologist. If you listen to an interview he did with Professor Glenn Deason as the summit was going on, he nailed it exactly. Trump wanted a ceasefire. Putin held his ground, and if Trump wants to end the war, he needs to convince the public that's brainwashed that the profits of the big companies won't decrease. And I believe that if he does take a strong position, his life is in danger. And I think it should be clear that anybody who aspires to be president in the future should know that if he goes against the powers that be, his life is definitely in danger. Thank you very much for your show. It is great.
Well, that's the best call of the night, and we've had many good calls, David. That is, in a nutshell, where we exactly are. That Trump's own life is in danger if he pursues to the end his, and I agree with McGregor, his intention, his wish, at least, to bring about an end to at least one war, whilst prosecuting others and helping others to exterminate the Palestinian people, for example. But on the Ukraine war, I believe that he wants to end that war. But his own life is in danger if he does. The Chihuahuas that are on the plane headed to North America are there for a reason. They are giving voice to, their bark is dictated by the very interests that you have described. Plus, the desperate problem they have is that if Ukraine goes tits up, then they're going to be exposed as having destroyed their own economies, destroyed their own country's freedoms in a losing war, in a losing cause. And that will focus, in most cases, perhaps not in Britain, a relentless forensic focus on just exactly why we did that. Why did Germany destroy its industrial base because of hatred for Russia? Why? What was in the interest of the German people to do that? Ditto in France, ditto in Britain. Why was it in our interest? What interest did we have in whose flag flew over Slavyansk when 3 different flags, 4 different flags have flown over it in the last 100 years? Where even is Slavyansk? Who would sacrifice their son, their daughter, their job, their economy for Slavyansk? You'd have to have your brain examined if you were up for that. But that's exactly what we have done and why we have done it. Thanks. Best call of the night from David in Montreal. But now we've got my co-star for the social media roundup. It's my good wife, Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Today is an important day for me and the people of Indonesia because on this day, 80 years ago, 17 August 1945, is when Sukarno proclaimed independence from the Dutch. This happened 2 days after the Japanese occupation surrendered. So he seized the moment and declared independence. He was the face of the revolution. He had many were involved, many names. Hatta, most importantly, his vice president. The Dutch at that time were, of course, in the aftermath, just about aftermath of the Second World War. They didn't accept it, and they waged another war against us for 4 more years. So, as I explained to our son earlier today, in the Dutch history books, today is not acknowledged as Independence Day. They say it was 1949 when the Dutch gave the independence to Indonesia, but
so
not
wait a
us.
minute. They fought the German invaders for either 3 days or 5 days, depending on who's counting. but they fought the Indonesians for 4 years after the declaration of independence. Wow.
Yeah, indeed. So that's us today, 80 years independence.
Congratulations.
And there's been festivities all over amongst the Indonesian diaspora. My sister and my brother were themselves involved in a big initiative in the Netherlands to celebrate the occasion.
And two of our children are celebrating in London.
Yeah, with the embassy in London. But where are we 8 years later? So we are now the 4th largest country in the world, 3rd largest democracy, the largest Muslim population. And as you often hear me say, we are like a sleeping giant, because how often do you hear Indonesia other than Bali, right? So
you need to increase your footprint in
must.
world affairs.
And how wonderful news is it that on today's Independence Day, Indonesia, the MOATS podcast is #1 in Indonesia. Terima kasih Indonesiaku. Keep going, lanjut dengar dan nonton MOATS di YouTube. So yes.
You tell me later what that was.
But the way John Perkins put it, as Indonesia was his first...
the economic hitman.
John Perkins was and wrote the autobiography, The Economic Hitman, and Indonesia was his first project. Indonesia is like a CIA dream, isn't it? And we're still...
They killed millions of Indonesians. The Dutch fought you for 4 years, and then the Americans took over.
4 years. The Dutch were in Indonesia for 350 years, all over the island.
Sure, I mean after independence, they kept the fight going. But they robbed your country for 350 years. Yeah. And then the Americans took over. The CIA took over. They overthrew the Sukarno government and bathed the country in blood.
Yeah, installed their puppet dictator Suharto. So as you know, we are from a family, we are Sukarno's family, so his memory lives on in our family and in our own household. All right, so moving on to the email from Bill Riley in New York. He says, George, please have Miss Rachel on your show. She was on Democracy Now! The other morning, and a clip showed her dancing with a little girl from Gaza with prosthetic legs. Now,
we've tried.
So Miss Rachel is obviously a big YouTube influencer, and our kids love her, and she's got a lot of critique for standing up and speaking up for Palestine, but she's doubled down. She says that she'll risk her career to advocate for children in Gaza. And unfortunately, I have to correct your stats from earlier. The comparison with the children dead in Ukraine, it's not
21.3 in Gaza.
It's 37.7.
Oh my God.
So that is an unfortunate fact. Also something you mentioned earlier about journalism and media bias, and you had to quote someone from 100 years ago, but we don't even have to go that far. We just have to go back over 2 decades during the Iraq War, when there were obviously 2 sides, and you were on one side and you were still being invited. You were still being heard.
I was on TV every single day in the run-up to the Iraq War, during the war and after the war. Who would put me on mainstream TV now? None of them. Absolutely none of them.
So Ahmed says, I just wanted to take a moment to sincerely thank you for your dedication and the work you have done. Your efforts have not gone unnoticed, and I truly appreciate the energy, courage, and commitment you bring. Please know that your voice does make a difference and inspires many. I wish you all the very best, health, happiness, and success in everything you do. Prosthetic Anger 1997 says, a genuine and heartfelt happy birthday to you, George Galloway. I am glad that our lives coincided. Happy birthday, honey.
Thank you, very kind. I got a lovely signed print of Clint Eastwood for a few dollars more. I'm really a big fan of Clint Eastwood's work, so thanks. That's what I got from my missus. Yes. It was a very imaginative buy, actually.
So, just quickly, some answers to the poll. Who won the Alaska summit? As the way Boris Johnson put it, it was the most vomiting-inducing episode in all the Tory history of international diplomacy.
That's what Johnson said?
Yes.
My God, is there a more vomit-inducing individual on the planet than Boris Johnson?
Yeah, because he's thinking, oh, they're ruining my intervention of making this war.
Yeah.
Anyway, so... Ewan Youth0 says they both want George. Putin won the narrative, the change of agenda from land swap, ceasefire, BS to root cause issue. Trump won an escape door from the sanction and rhetoric he had wildly touted. And James Foley says, I think the summit suited both sides' aims. Putin restored a diplomatic relationship and did Trump a big favor in helping him to get out of Ukraine and dump the whole US-instigated mess onto his vassals, the Europeans.
Well, I hope so. I mean, we're going to see if Trump is a man or a mouse tomorrow.
Yes.
I mean, if he succumbs, he's a mouse. If he stands up to them and kicks them out the door, he's a man. And moreover, a man that will have done the world a signal service. But I don't myself believe that we're quite at the stage yet. And it's not that I want the war to continue, but my reading of it is that the losing side is not ready to accept its defeat, and that therefore the war will continue until that changes. That's my view.
Alas, I'm going to leave it at that because we've got some legends,
two legends
down the line.
Two legends on the line. Thanks for that. We'll have chips later. Erobos, the legend in New York, on the two-state solution. Go ahead, Erobos.
Greetings and salutations, and a wonderful evening, day, morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. And a feliz cumpleaños para ti, and a happy birthday to you. And a wonderful clan Galloway, the magnificent MOATS staff. Shout out to Jaya, Slavians, Kupians, who knows, right? And the wonderful Mrs. Gayatri Galloway and the fabulous bride in white, Independence Day. Get up, at least I hope Indonesia has a better Independence Day than what we have in the post-third world. Somehow we ended up in the global majority. All we have is flag and document paper independence. We can't do anything, at least the people in the islands that I was taken away from, they can't do anything without Great Britain's permission, even right now. So more power to Indonesia and Clan Galloway's birthday. Spectacular. Just a quick thing that I saw before I move on to the point that I would like to make. Apparently, Saudi Arabia, to their great surprise, they are upset that Israel wants their land for the so-called Greater Israel Project. And I said, good, because they have formed a land bridge supporting Israel, so-called Israel, the Zionist terrorist occupation colony, ZTOC, all of this time. And now they're upset that their land is about to be confiscated, or so they're being told. Yeah, they supported it, right? And even though they didn't create the monster, as in Frankenstein, they have encouraged the rabid dog, right? They have empowered the rabid dog, and now the rabid dog is forming towards them. So good. Now they'll get to know what it feels like. I'm not saying that all the people who will be destroyed in the process, the civilians, that should happen to them. But these so-called, these dictatorships, these family Arab Gulf and gas dictatorship, Fagod, they should have it coming down upon their head. The main issue, and I'm just going to wrap with this, the main issue of my call is, looking at because I've learned a lot just from listening to you about the two-state solution. But what I've come to realize is there was a fundamental flaw baked in from the beginning, that it would have resulted in what we had here in the United States of America, and in some case still have, the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision, which said that separate but equal, that's what I'm getting at. It was built in the two-state solution, right? So even without all the external things of keeping the Palestinians who were pushed off and evicted, keeping them out, it was built to fail, and it would have inevitably created apartheid anyway, because separate but equal, the people who were in charge of that system are the same racists, the same Zionists, the same apartheid mentality colonists that would be in charge of the two-state solution. So it was baked in to fail from the very beginning, and it would have resulted in a separate but equal line. And separate is never equal because of the same people that's running it. It's institutionalized, baked-in failure. And I just wanted to, and I know you've thought about that, but I haven't anybody articulated that way, so I just wanted to share that.
No, you articulated it extremely well. We had a public meeting just the other night. If you haven't watched it yet, you get it on my YouTube channel. It was episode 2 of our One State Palestine campaign with excellent speakers. I gave an opening address and then excellent speakers. And that campaign is growing apace because the One State in Palestine campaign is the only campaign that would lead to an actual solution. The so-called two-state solution is not a solution. It wasn't when it was baked, and it sure as hell ain't now that the ground has literally shifted under its feet. 1993 was the Oslo Agreement. It's now 2025, and there's not 1 centimeter of Palestine which is free. It's time to give up on what is, frankly, a chimera. Thanks, Erebos. There's another legend on the line. To finish the show, it's the legend in Bristol. Norma in Bristol. Good evening, Norma. What would you like to say to bring the show to a happy ending?
Well, it is really. It's just on a little lighter note. Jay Powers, who you had on the other week, he made this film. It lasted 7 minutes. About on Twitter yesterday, and it was a scenic ride down a busy street in Moscow. And honestly, George, it was so beautiful. They had the restaurants, lots of green leaf arches, shady places where you could sit, and it was a nice architecture, and it was clean and tidy, and you know, it was a tonic to watch. I thought, oh, I wouldn't mind going there. I know you've spent time there, but it was
we
lovely.
have, and we'll be going again soon for the World Festival of Youth. I've got to put it to you clearly. I would be lying if I hid this. Moscow is the new Rome. Moscow is the most beautiful and best capital city anywhere in the world. And that's why Che Bose was taking that long 7-minute video as he was just out walking. Brian MacDonald has done the same, because you can make Moscow speak for itself. You can just show what Moscow is really like. And inevitably people are drawn to it. Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk, who was with us during our recent visit to Moscow, he described it as the new Rome. He described it as the greatest capital city in the world. And believe me, he had no political predilection towards Russia or towards Moscow. He'd never been there before. And his eyes weren't just open, they were agog, Bristol. And Norma, and if I could take you to Moscow, believe me, I'd do it in a minute. Norma in Moscow. Well, that would be a wonderful video. It would get even more views than Che Bose. Norma, thank you, and you sound wonderful. You're perky and full of life, and long may that continue. Norma in Bristol brings the show to an end, 6 minutes and 38 seconds late. I'm sorry, Gayatri, I know there's a pressure of time because the chip shop closes early here. But with a bit of luck, I'll be back on Wednesday for the midweek edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows. I hope you enjoyed it tonight, and if you did, spread the word. Bring another viewer with you. Why don't you? Next Wednesday. And thanks for all the happy birthday wishes. When you get to my age, you don't really celebrate birthdays. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.